He came home from his mission in July?
Yes.
Yeah, July, and was immediately called to be the explorer leader. The other interesting thing was there were about 15 explorers.
I thought there was no way it was going to work because I was going to school and working on the farm, and I just didn't see how I could get that worked in with all of the other things.
I was 17 years old. No, I was 16 years old. I was going to turn 17 in September. Really what I remember is helping at home, taking care of siblings. At that point, why I needed to earn money, and so Dad was determined that I was going to sell Fuller Brush. I hated that. That's mostly what I did.
Well, it was the opening social for MIA, and it was a Sadie Hawkins Day race.
So when you were a young man, Dad, what did you do for when it was Sadie Hawkins?
Well, they were supposed to, boys were going to line up, and he was supposed to, and he'd shoot the shotgun once, and then they were supposed to wait 30 seconds and then shoot it. So the girls could take off, but he'd waited about 5 seconds and shot the second shot, and I was afraid this big Laurel girl was going to catch me, so I run like, you know what, to the out of bounds ditch on the south side of the road, and Lloyd and I hid in the ditch till it was over.
We didn't go to Mutual during the summer. There was a closing social in May. There was an opening social in September. It really wasn't even in August because that's when we started school. I don't remember being really excited about that night specifically. I remember the boys ran and then the girls were supposed to go chase them, and then you were to come back to the front step of the old church house and be married by, I don't know if it was a bishop or whoever it was. And then I thought I remembered we went in and had refreshments. I wasn't into any of the boys, so it was not that big a deal to me.
So the Sadie Hawkins Day race when I was a boy was different. When you asked me to tell about, I was responsible for those priests, and I didn't want them to run out of bounds.
Like you had?
Like I had. So when I drove around the block trying to make sure the boys didn't run out of bounds.
We were just walking around. It was Betty and Linda and I were just walking around, and really honestly, he was just there north of the church driving around, and Linda said, "There's Ed Cottle. I think I'll just catch him." And I says, "No, you don't get to, I do." And then I just reached in the window and said, "I've got you." The silly part is that wasn't that long after he came home from his mission, and I thought it was still a thing between he and Rachel, which it wasn't. She'd written him a Dear John, but I don't know that I even knew that. And there were probably 8 girls in the ward trying to get him to ask them out. And so the other fun thing was both his mother and my mother, probably my dad too, their callings were in the young men, young women. And so they were there too. Finally, when the time was up, however they determined that, then he just drove back in and we walked up the stairs and got married. His mother had a smile from ear to ear. I remember that. We really didn't do a lot of dating. We were thrown together, no doubt. We would see each other on Sundays. He was my Sunday school teacher, and there were 30 of us in the class.
I was the Sunday school teacher for her class and the ones younger.
No, the one's older.
Older. And the lesson was supposed to be on saving yourself for marriage, and so I made a sandwich and put butter on the sandwich and then licked it all over and then tried to get some of them to eat it. And tried to tie that into... Anyway, I don't know if it affected her or not, but we didn't even kiss forever.
And then we saw each other on Tuesday nights every week because it was mutual, and he had his calling and I had my calling. The next thing I remember was I started really liking him and wishing he would ask me out. And so our state conference came up, and we went over to state conference, and I sat on the end purposely in hopes that he would come in and sit down by me, which he did. And then he said, "Can I take you home?" But of course he was with his parents. So they sat in the back and we sat in the front and we came home. As we moved toward the end of the year, there was a really neat New Year's Eve dance over to the Stake Center. And every girl wanted to go. And I really wanted to go. And I wished Ed would take me, but we weren't really sure how that was going to happen. Ed rode to school to USU with 3 or 4 kids from town. Marjorie and DJ were more my age. They were in that same Sunday school class. And they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and in fact, they did marry. And so Marjorie and I had a talk one time, and I said, if Eddie Cottle, he's not Ed, it was Eddie. If Eddie Cottle doesn't know who to take and asks, tell him to take me.
There were several of us that rode together to go to the university, carpool together. And one of those individuals was DJ Federico, and he liked Marjorie, who was a friend to Janet. And he said he was going to take Marjorie, and I asked him who I should take, and that's when he said, "Why don't you take Janet?" Because they had worked that out ahead of time.
So by then I had been asked, and I was really excited about it. Every Christmas Eve in Trenton, there was always a Santa Claus party, which is one of my most fond memories. And we were there. We weren't together specifically, but I saw him after. Now, keep in mind that after the Santa Claus party, we always went over to Grandma Pitcher's and had her Christmas party. And Ed came and asked me if I'd like to go help him wrap gifts. And that sounded really exciting to me. And I remember saying to my mom, "Is that okay?" And she was like, "Yeah, that is way okay." So we piled in the car together and went down to his house. And he took me in his bedroom where his gifts were. And we wrapped his gifts on his bed. And then I invited him to go to Grandma Griffin's Christmas dinner party. It was at noontime at her. It was at her house, wasn't it?
Was it her house?
We were together and we were having a really good time. And there were his family was having a party at the same time, and they were wondering why he didn't come home. And he couldn't figure out how to get out of there. Yes. Okay.
Well, the reason I thought it was evening was because I stumbled on the steps. Grandma Pearl had steps built into the lawn, and they were kind of different. Well, around that stakes conference time, this girl has everything that I would want in a wife. It was a really fun dance, and I danced close enough that I felt like this is the girl I want to marry.
I didn't know that.
Well, I think the plan was to kiss her that night, but I can't remember if it happened or not.
Mom, did he kiss you that night?
I have to be honest, I'm not sure either. I just remember it was a really, really fun dance, and I loved being with him and felt like I was so lucky. There wasn't an awfully lot to do. I went to basketball games at Skyview during that time, but the fun part was church basketball, because Eddie played on the same team as Cleon did. And
I was trying to decide whether to date her or not, so I asked her brother if she had a boyfriend. And he said, "No, she's just waiting for you to ask her."
He did do that to me.
Each of the wards held a golden green ball and had a floor show, and we were involved because it was her grandma that taught the dances. We were involved as a couple in those, so we went to quite a few golden green balls and dances.
When it was time for our golden green ball, which usually happened in March, I think, for the floor show, I wanted to get to dance, but we we paired off. Now, remember, I told you there were 20 kids my age, and a lot of them had paired off. And so, but I wasn't, there was nobody that I really liked. And so I went to Ed one night and said, hey, I want to dance. Will you be my partner? And he said yes. And so that really did throw us together. And then later on, we went down to Salt Lake City to the All Dance Festival. And Grandpa and Grandma Pitcher were the ones in the stake that taught us the dances.
And it was kind of I remember it was at the University of Utah Stadium, and it was a cold night. So to keep her warm, I stood her in front of me and put my coat around her, and one of the ushers come by and stopped and looked and like, what are you guys doing? No, just keeping warm.
One of the crazy things about our dating was that besides not doing anything fantastically wonderful, we spent a lot of time together. After mutual, he'd take me home. We'd sit out in front of Mother and Dad's house in the car and talk for 2 hours at a time about plans and fun and everything. During those that time that we were dating, I would come down and have dinner with his parents sometimes, and he came to my house and had Sunday dinner with our family quite a bit. And one day, I was at his house, and he asked me if I'd like to go hiking. Now you have to know I hate to go hiking, but I was really excited to go hiking with Eddie.
Well, I had decided that I wanted to marry her, but I didn't know if she wanted to get married yet. I knew she was still in high school, but I wanted to find out her feelings, so I asked her to go on a hike. The hill, it was where I spent a lot of time as a teenager. I knew places that I really liked, and so we hiked up on the hill, and coming down the hill, I picked a flower and started picking off the petals. She loves me not, she loves me, and it turned out she loves me not. So we picked another flower and did the same thing, and it come out, she loves me not. So I didn't know what to do then.
So I picked another flower and said, here, try this one. And so he pulled off the petals. I was a little nervous. I kept wondering what it was going to say. And sure enough, it said, she loves me. And I remember looking into his face and saying, now see? And he gave me a great big hug and a kiss, and then we floated down the hill.
So that's what, then I felt like I was safe to go buy a diamond. And I didn't know you were supposed to take the girl to pick out the diamond. I thought that was my job, and it was a very modest diamond, but the day after I had purchased it, her best friend Linda's sister saw me at the university and said, oh, what you been doing, buying a diamond? And I didn't know what to answer, except I remember thinking, well, that won't be a surprise now.
Actually, when we were getting engaged, that was how it happened. The young man went to the jewelry store and picked out the diamond, and the young lady had nothing to do with it. And of course you were absolutely delighted because you loved the diamond that he had picked out for you.
So after the flower incident, and I knew I was on pretty solid ground, I decided I needed to ask her. But I wanted to ask her dad first, and I had decided I was going to do it right after lunch. So the only time to talk to her dad was after Sunday school. So I asked him, and he looked at me kind of like, you stupid nut, why, of course you can.
My mother and dad were very excited that I was going to get to marry Eddie.
So then after lunch, we were sitting on the porch, and I was trying to figure out a way to ask her, and she was trying to figure out a way to get grass down my neck.
I had no idea he was thinking about what he was thinking about. I should have been smarter than that, because I sewed all my own clothes, and so I just finished a pair of red and white pinstripe shorts and a white top, And of course, when I talk shorts, they were to my knee. We didn't wear anything immodest. And my mother was so upset when I left. She knew I was going down to spend time with Ed. And so she was really upset because my blouse was sleeveless and I was in shorts. And I couldn't figure out why she cared.
But when I finally asked her, it changed the mood quickly and she became very serious. Said yes.
Probably the next big event was seminary graduation for me. He had asked me to marry him, and I had said yes, but I had no idea when we would become engaged.
Well, I had planned and planned and planned to get a diamond and planned to give it to her after seminary, after she graduated from seminary. And
can I stop you right there? Isn't it interesting that he would think to do it at a church function? Because the rest of our lives has been nothing but church. Okay. And Ed came to my seminary graduation, and then he took me home after.
I had the diamond in the jockey box, so I just reached over and got the box and gave it to her.
And I became really quiet one more time. It was hard for me to believe this was really happening to me because there were 20 kids my age in Trenton, and I was the only one that was seriously dating a fellow. And so it was like all of a sudden I was going to be growing up really fast. I loved the diamond. It was gorgeous, and I was way excited.
I remember her being criticized. He never talked to me, but her seminary principal thought she was making a big mistake and called her in and talked to her about not being old enough to be married. And
I didn't really care. I knew what I was getting, and so I did not really care. The other fun thing was in my chemistry class, there were two of us that got engaged at graduation time. Interestingly enough, the other one was Tamara Chambers, who was one of my best friends for a very long time and still is. But my chemistry teacher said, "I don't believe that's a real diamond." And I said, "Oh, yes, it is." And he said, "Well, take it off and let's scratch the window. If it scratches the window, it's a real diamond." But I was not about to take it off.
after I gave her the diamond after seminary graduation, I thought that was the end of the evening, and for some dumb reason she wanted to go show everybody. Well, like her parents and her grandparents and my parents.
And you weren't expecting
I had no idea that would happen.
I loved him a lot by then, and so we sat really close on the way home in the car, and my girlfriends passed us. I didn't know that till later, and they told me the next day that they thought I was sitting ridiculously close to him. Mother and Dad had almost no money when we got married. In fact, they wished we would wait a couple more months, but they were willing to work with us because we wanted to get married before Ed started school. And so we had picked September, but Mother and Dad Sarah Lynn was a brand new baby, and she was premature, so that meant that they had a great big hospital bill. Cleon was on his mission, and so they were paying for a missionary. Now all of a sudden Eddie and I were getting married. That meant that there was no money for pictures. They didn't do as fancy pictures as they do nowadays, but my uncle just took some snapshots, and of course in the dark church house they were very dark. But the one thing Mother said they felt like they could pay for was a picture of Ed and I in our wedding attire. And so we went to see Orvid at least a week before we were married. That made people crazy in those days, because the rule was if he sees you in your bridal gown before you get married, then you probably won't stay married. And so, but that's how we did it, because that's what Mother and Dad could afford. My dress cost me, I think it was either $13 or $17, and I made it myself, and then helped make all of the bridesmaids' dresses, and they cost more than my gown did. Anyway, kind of a funny thing, but fun for us to remember.
You have to realize that both of us had jobs to do. It was to get the cows milked and get everything done and then go get married. It wasn't the primary, well, I don't know how to say it. It wasn't, it had to take its place in everything else. She had to get her sisters ready. We come from the temple and they were busy fixing the gym and getting everybody ready, and I had to get cows milked, and we had the quote wedding breakfast on the lawn, if I remember right.
North of the church house.
It was a terrible day because I lost a diamond in the endowment room and couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, the workers coming through after picked it up. It slid off my finger. So I was in agony going, what am I going to say when I don't have the ring? So that wasn't very cool.
I don't remember that part at all, so obviously it wasn't bothering me. But I actually am really glad that they let kids go through and do their endowment on a different day than they get married. I think that is so important, because I was trying to think about all the wedding things we needed to do while I was in the temple, and I wish I could have done that differently. And so like he said, after the wedding breakfast, then he hurried home to get the cows milked with his dad, and I took off and helped get my sisters, who were my bridesmaids, ready for the reception, do their hair and whatever. And remember that Sarah Lynn was only, I think, 3 months old and was premature, so there was just a lot going on at then, and so I didn't feel like our wedding actually, the festivities of our wedding didn't actually begin until after the reception and we could leave.
Well, in order to stay in school, I had taken a deferment from the draft till I finished school.
I think you need to make an explanation there. At that point, they were sending a lot of people to Vietnam. Many, many, many young men did not come back except in a pine casket. And so they drew your number according to your birthday.
Yeah.
And so anybody, like, if your number came up, then you were the next ones they sent.
Because I had taken a deferment to finish school, then I had to go right after I finished school. I finished school the 10th of August, and I was in Fort Lewis, Washington by the 10th of September. I didn't get to go in what they call the lottery.
So he said that he got your graduation papers on the 10th of September, or 10th of August.
10th of August.
And we had already, he had already signed a contract to teach in North Ogden. That's where Uncle Mel taught, and so we were ready to move. We'd actually gone down the Wasatch Front looking for places to live in between Brigham City and North Ogden, and everything was serious. We were moving to North Ogden, and then all of a sudden everything changed, and his draft papers said, you will go and you will be gone.
That was probably the hardest thing I'd done, getting on that bus, 4 o'clock in the morning, raining, driving away through Wellsville. That was as hard as it gets. Mom and Rochelle and Linda.
Rochelle. Not Linda yet.
Oh, that's right, not Linda yet.
Not Linda yet.
My actual experience in the Army wasn't that bad. I was in basic training with a unit of mostly Utah guys. When I went to Vietnam, because of my training and my ability to type, I spent most of my time kind of like a supply sergeant and clerk for Major Gesselman. Never carried a gun most of the time, had a driver's license and could do church work and trying to organize a branch. It turned out it never happened, but I value my experience. Not that I like to be away from home, but my experience in the Army is about as much as my experience as a missionary. I had a chance to do missionary work and but it was terrible being away from home.
So he was gone before our second anniversary. Rochelle was just 1 year old.
In Fort Lewis to Washington in December, it's cold and rainy, and everybody had, I call it the flu. I had a temperature and normal flu symptoms, and they put us in the hospital and were not letting us home for leave if we had a fever. So I just got a cup of ice and kept ice in my mouth. So when she put the thermometer in there, put it on the ice. When she come back to check it, she didn't believe it, but she figured out what I was doing and just let it go. And I got to come home for a week.
Yeah, probably for a week. It was Christmas. And then he had to turn around and go back.
When I got towards Christmas time, I was missing home a whole bunch and decided to try and do something about it. So I wrote home and asked them to gather up clothes and shoes for kids. In the town that I was stationed, there was 3 orphanages with 200 kids in each one, and they didn't have shoes or clothes, and so they rounded up a bunch of stuff and sent to me, and I was able to take it to the local orphanage. Helped a little missing Christmas.
One of the things we've talked about a lot to do with is our lack. I wrote him a letter every single day and stand up. He'd get them in batches more than single day. But the telephone calls were, well, in this day and age, we'd consider it ridiculous because we had to use the ham operator. And so we could only talk once a week. And it was for about 5 to 10 minutes. And so I shared that time with his folks. But that also meant that Grandpa and Grandma could hear everything we were saying. And so could the ham operator, and the 3 people between could hear everything we were saying. So it was not personal, really personal at all. It was not fun. I'm not jealous of what the kids have nowadays, but I think it's a good thing that life has changed.
Well, because after being married 4 years, we lived 2 years separated. No matter how difficult life got, we knew it could be a lot worse, and we were thankful for just the fact that we could be together.
I've said lots of times, I just was so glad that I could go to bed with Ed, because that was not fun for 2 years. Because we'd lived together for 2 years, we'd always gone to bed together, of course, and then all of a sudden for 2 years you went to bed alone, and that was not fun. Had to make all the decisions myself about the kids and them being sick and whether they were sick enough to take them to the doctor and all that kind of stuff, because we didn't have insurance, and so it was a lot of money if we had to go to the doctor. Ed sent every bit of money home to me the entire time he was gone. We were still trying to pay off our bill for Rochelle's C-section, which was $1,000 then. That sounds like such a pittance amount of money, but you have to remember that our income was about $200 a month. So that amount was at least 5 or 6 months if we had not had anything else to pay for. So one other thing that Vietnam taught us, and living separated for 2 of the first 4 years we were married, was that no matter what, we did not want to fight. That's more Ed's personality anyway, but he has treated me like a queen every single day of my life and never raised his voice at me in 50 years. And one of the things that we've realized is that somehow we've managed to attain a celestial marriage right here on earth, and we look forward to living together eternally.
So 50 years of marriage has taught me the importance of family. If you're going to live together eternally, why not enjoy that blessing while you're here on earth and work towards a celestial marriage? It makes life a lot easier and you're a lot happier. And I thank my Heavenly Father for a wonderful bride for 50 years.